I couldn't tell you how many podcasts I've been on, but the reach we're starting to see.
It's awesome. Good stuff. Yeah. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Note Closer Show. As always, Scott Carson, excited to be here with you today. And I am jacked up to have the man in his field, the guy that absolutely rocks out his specific niche of real estate investing. And we get a lot of questions about his niche from different investors out there looking to dive into notes or wanting to see if notes can work for them. I am talking about Mr. Dave Foster, the 1031 investor. Good morning, Dave. How's it going?
Good morning, Scott. We're doing awesome. By the way, I was a little confused. When we logged on, I wasn't sure if I had the right podcast or not, because I looked behind me and I expected to see burnt orange.
Well, I didn't go to Texas, but I am a big fan out there. Right?
There it is. Beautiful.
I am a big University of Texas fan, definitely, and gotta love it. Beating Georgia this last bowl season, big win. The program's looking at good things, and we're pretty excited about that. But as an ex-football player, yeah, I gotta have I got my, you can see behind me my piggy bank with the Longhorn logo and some other things. So
I gotta tell you, I bleed purple and white, but I'm not going to hold that against you.
Oh, that's okay. I appreciate that this morning out there. But Dave, for those that are listeners that are either listening to this episode on iTunes or any of our 20 plus podcasting platforms or our different Note Nation family across the different airways, take a couple minutes and share who you are and why they should be listening to you this morning.
Sure. Well, what I do for 20 years now, I have lived within a niche of real estate tax law that few people know of, but is so powerful to building an investor's portfolio as they go through their investing career. It's called the 1031 tax-deferred exchange. And basically what it is in a nutshell is the opportunity that the IRS gives us to sell investment real estate. And by using a certain process, purchasing new investment real estate, you get to defer indefinitely paying the tax on the gain and all depreciation recapture. So when you stop and think that by the time you include federal and state capital gains tax in most states, you're going to spend 20% of your profit just paying your silent partner, Uncle Sam. By using the 1031 exchange, you're able to take that 20% and buy more real estate for yourself. And you can imagine how that leverages itself throughout the years of an investing career. And that's what I do.
Yeah, anytime you can add another 25% of your bottom line without having to pay Uncle Sam, or defer that, it's a very powerful tool to do that. Now, one of the 1031 actually, I always like to do a little research on different topics before going on, and it's basically 1031 is the IRS tax code number, correct? That's why it's known so well for. But it's called a deferred exchange, is what I guess the legal terms of what we're talking about, right?
That is correct. Yeah, 1031 is the section of the tax code, and it's kind of funny because a lot of people think of it as this new thing, and I hear it called a loophole. And dude, it's been around since 1922. Now, originally, it started out as a way to let landowners who were land rich and cash poor, matter of fact, a few in your neck of the woods there, trade properties so that they could parcel together their farms better without having to invest cash or pay tax. So it was a way of stimulating the agrarian economy. Well, about 1970, this bright guy in the North timberland, and then went out over the course of 2 years and bought a truckload of other properties. His name was Starker. And so a lot of folks listening today might recognize that as another euphemism for the process, a Starker exchange. Well, the long and short of it is the IRS disagreed. He was lawyered up. So for 20 years, they duked it out. And ultimately, as never happens in real life, he won. So now what we have is a process where you don't have to swap properties. You can simply sell a property and then go and purchase your replacement. Again, using a very special process because, as you can imagine, the IRS has to let us do it, but they don't have to make us like it. So there's still a little passive aggressiveness in the statute, but that is what it is. It's that easy now, and that's what people don't understand.
Now, before we dive into asset classes on different things, let's talk about some of the time frames. You're selling an asset. How long do you have to identify the new property? Then how long do you have to close on it? I think those are two of the biggest things that as timing goes, right?
Those are the two that can really trip you. As a matter of fact, I have more exchanges fail because of those time frames than anything else. But the first and foremost thing that people have to understand is you have to use a third party who's going to document the exchange and who's going to hold your proceeds. If you have constructive or actual receipt of the proceeds, the IRS won't let you do it. There's too much opportunity for you to move the money in ways you shouldn't. Mm-hmm. So there's this whole class of people called qualified intermediaries. And that's what we do is document and process. So that QI has to be in place prior to the closing of your sale. And you want to think about your 1031 exchange as starting with that sale. For you and I, that's kind of backwards. As a real estate investor, you make all your money when?
On the buy.
When you buy it.
Yeah.
When you're doing 1031 exchanges, you're saving all your taxes when you sell. So that starts your 1031. From that date of the closing of your sale, you've only got 45 more days to identify your potential replacements. So now after day 45, that list goes so hard, and those are the only properties you can choose from. Now you have a total of 180 days to complete that purchase. But as you can imagine, that 45 days is kind of a time crunch. So there's a few things that we will talk to people about when they're early on that can help to mitigate that. Number one, you can always go into contract for your new property whenever you want. You just can't take title until after you close your sale. So while things were really, really hot as a seller's market, sure, it was tough to get contingency contracts, but now it's a little bit easier. Get a seller to give you a contract contingent on when you sell your old property to start the 1031. And that can work very well. Of course, to mitigate as much risk and give you as much sleep at night as you'd like, try to get not only under contract, but even close during that 45-day period. That does a couple of things. First of all, it eliminates the risk of going past day 45 and not having something. But also, the quicker you can get that money put back to work, the quicker it's performing for you.
That would almost double your return in the first year because you're not waiting that 180 days to close on it, correct? That's
exactly right.
That's the numbers that pop in my head. Yeah, sorry.
Yep, that's exactly right. So those are a few of the things that people will use. And when you stop and think about it, if you actually run the calendar backwards, the normal investor is probably going to do a 30-day fix-up. Then they're going to put it on the market, and it's going to be 60 days to close. And if you add 45 more days on top of that, you're looking at really 4 or 5 months to locate your new property. So although it feels very tight, it's not quite as tight as you would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. With a lot of different things that go on with that. Now, a traditional first link, because we talk about note investing. Let's talk about the type of properties people can use or the type of investments people can or cannot use to qualify for a deferred exchange. How's that sound, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is and by the way, prior to 2018, so there's still a lot of confusion out there now. Prior to 2018, it was any kind of real estate for any other kind of real estate and any kind of personal property for any other kind of personal property. So you could sell a jet airliner and purchase another jet airliner, heavy equipment. Where it interfaces with us are things like assets of restaurants and hotels. You can exchange the real estate portion of a restaurant for other investment real estate. And then you could also tack on another exchange of the equipment for the restaurant for more restaurant equipment. So it was an awesome way to defer all kinds of tax. Well, because they're the government and they're here to help, they eliminated that part of the statute. So now it is solely for investment real estate. But any kind of investment real estate will qualify as what we call like kind for any other kind. So sell a single family home that's been held for investment, purchase a duplex. Sell a duplex, purchase an industrial warehouse. Sell an industrial warehouse, purchase farmland. Sell farmland, purchase a condo complex. It all counts. It's an amazing variety that's out there. And you'll appreciate this being from where you're at, strangely enough, because all states define it this way. Oil interests and natural gas interests and mineral rights interests, whether they are working interests or royalty interests in existing wells, qualify as real estate.
Wow.
Get out of town.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could sell a duplex and go buy a royalty interest in some working wells. Now, what's kind of cool about that in today's world, just because it's an aside, is that typically real estate and oil go side by side, don't they? Yep. When oil's down, real estate's down. Well, we're in this lovely cycle now where we're at what we think is close to the top of a real estate cycle. But what's oil starting to do? It's just now surging because of the things that the new administration has done with OPEC. So we're in this contra cycle, aren't we? Where now I've got some investors that are starting to jump off the real estate wagon and jump onto oil. And they're doing it without paying tax because of the 1031 exchange. Now, here in Florida, we've got some really fun things that are called real estate. One of them is a hole in the water where you park a boat. We call it a dockminium. That's really literally all it is. It's a place in a marina. But if you have a deeded tenant share in that real estate, that is real estate. So you could sell an investment condo and purchase a slip to rent out for investment and turn that into a home for your next vacation boat, right?
Wow. That's neat.
Mobile homes, same sort of thing. The key is that it's got to be real estate. So the state has to consider it as real estate. And the best way to know is, do you have a deed? And do you get a tax bill every year from the property appraiser?
So that would justify us in buying contract for deeds, where we're getting the deed on the property and we're getting the tax bill sent to us on the county appraisal district then. Is that correct?
If you're actually getting the bill sent to you in your name so that you are the deeded owner, then yes, that would qualify. Now, typically in land contract sales, the sale is deemed to happen the moment the contract is signed and not when the deed transfers. But when that deed transfers, if it's like been an option, or if you're buying subject to a loan, but the deed still transfers, then yeah, absolutely, that would qualify for 1031.
Now, how difficult is it to, what's the word I'm looking for here, to identify this stuff? Working with a third-party intermediary like yourself to do this, what kind of simple documentations? Is it some paperwork? How difficult is this to do?
Yeah, well, the 1031 is just an added-on process to your normal operating. So you do everything you normally would, but there are additional documents that are part of the closing package. So you sign a few extra papers, and that's really it. It's kind of crazy. So where you would normally prepare your property for market, sell it, go and find new property, contract it, and purchase it, that's exactly what you do using all of your normal professionals. The difference is the QI is providing additional documentation, and your funds are going into escrow and being held for you until you complete your purchases.
Now, can somebody, if they're buying, can they take their money and the profits that they're getting from that property sale, at 1031 sale, can they use that as down payments, or do they have to use cash to buy the new asset full cash, or can it be partially financed?
That's a great question. So the rule for reinvestment is that if you want to defer all tax, you need to purchase at least as much real estate as you sell, and you need to use all of the proceeds in that purchase or purchases. But what you're getting at, it doesn't have to be one for one. And as a matter of fact, very few real estate investors do that. Most of my folks will take an appreciated asset, they will sell it, they will use the proceeds as down payments to purchase two or more. And there's a whole lot of wisdom behind that. First of all, when you're buying less expensive assets, usually your return on purchase is higher. You just get more rent per dollar for a $100,000 property than you do for a $200,000 property. So if it's appreciated to 200, sell it and go back and buy two $100,000 pieces of property. The other thing is that that's probably going to be a market niche that you know better. So rather than starting to price yourself out where you're ending up someplace where you're not real familiar, you keep selling and going right back into your sweet spot. You know what kind of floors to put in, what kind of finishings to put in on that property. And you sell them, then guess what happens? They appreciate, and you sell those and you buy two more. You appreciate, you sell those, you buy. And then a strange thing happens, Scott. You wake up one day and you're tired. And you can't figure out, why am I so tired? And then all of a sudden you realize it's because you've got this whole garden of small properties that are killing you. So what you start to do is sell 3 or 4 of those and purchase one larger asset, like a multifamily. And that's what's called consolidation. So the 1031 can let you diversify into different classes or different numbers of properties, and it can let you consolidate to wherever the market is wanting to lead you.
It's a really great thing out there because, yeah, a lot of people love building and buying more assets, but at some point you don't want to work that hard. That's why I like the note business.
Well, exactly. And that really actually dovetails really nicely into the second half of that, which was, how can you use your money? So why the heck is Dave on this note show? What in the world? Besides that you're a cool guy and I wanted to hang out with you for a while. Remember, the 1031 has to be real estate for real estate. So you use your proceeds to purchase another piece of real estate or a couple that are going to provide a better return for you. Now, one thing you may do is allocate those proceeds however you want. So purchase one property for all cash. Use the remaining as a down payment to highly leverage a second piece of property. So what you do, you got a 1031 exchange, sold your old property, you just bought better tax return, you started to consolidate your cash again, but you're aggressive and you like Scott, so what are you going to do? Do a refinance on that new property. Take the cash from that and go find a place to put it where you're going to generate a return. So are you at 5%? Maybe on an investment grade loan, 5 or 6. What can they make with you investing with notes? And that becomes the whole thing. Yeah. I heard that. Kramer. That's awesome.
That was brilliant there. So let's recap that. You've got money rolling out from 1031 exchange. You go pay cash for an asset, qualifies that. Then you go get go get a line of credit or get refinance, pull your capital out of it with a refinance, and then use that money from the bank or whoever you borrowed to use that to purchase your debt, your loan.
Exactly. And I love that strategy because it does a couple different things. First of all, it arbitrages your bank financing. So you're able, and I have no clue what the real numbers would be, but you're able to borrow at 5 and invest at 10. So you're making a nice return off of that. Secondly, though, and maybe more importantly, for an old fart like me, you're starting to move your active portfolio into a passive position. But you're doing it without having to pay tax. Now, if you've got $100,000 in built up capital gain, which isn't that much, that represents a $20,000 or $25,000 tax bill. Now, $25,000 invested at 10% is what? $2,500 a year.
Yep.
So for every $100,000 in profit that you defer the tax on, you're adding $2,500 a year to your pocket to spend as you want. Mm-hmm. And that's how retirements are built.
Mm-hmm. That is. Now, how does the asset have to be titled as far as a deed of trust? Has it be a person's name? Can it be in an entity, like an LLC or trust? Or I guess you wouldn't necessarily use somebody's self-directed IRA to fund this because that's basically tax deferred depending on how it's structured. Anyway.
That's exactly right. Any kind of tax deferred IRA, 401k, those kind of things, those are already tax deferred. So basically, the 1031 amount are the exact same product. One is used inside your retirement account. Yep. One is used outside your retirement account. The difference is that when you're doing it with the 1031 outside your retirement, you not only are getting the tax deferral, but you're getting the other benefits of real estate ownership, expense write-off, depreciation against the asset value. So all those kind of things reduce your own personal taxable income. If you're doing it within your IRA, you get the tax deferral, but you don't get any other stuff because there's no tax. So that could be that. But the key is that any tax-paying entity can do 1031s. So all those vehicles you just mentioned, S corps, LLCs, C corps, trusts, individual ownership, anybody can do a 1031 exchange, but the taxpayer for the old property has to remain the taxpayer for the new property. So if you have an S corp that wants to sell a piece of real estate, that S corp has to take title to the new piece of real estate.
Now, do they have to take it 100%, or it's solely them, or if they're bringing somebody in to partner, splitting the payment, 100% or partial?
Remember those investment requirements?
Yeah.
As long as you are purchasing at least as much as you sell. So if you sold a property for $200,000 and you wanted to buy a $400,000 quad with a friend, to complete your 1031, you would need to take title to 50% of it. Okay. So you take title to 50%, they could take title to the other 50%.
That's good to know. Because there's somebody that's asked that question out there if I wanted to partner with somebody out there, which is good. I mean, this is great stuff. What are the biggest mistakes that you see investors making that are trying to do a 1031 exchange? They're not identifying, like you said earlier on, but they get too squeezed by that 45-day without taking it seriously, or what are some of the mistakes you see people making?
Yeah, it goes back to what I teed off with at the very beginning. Every week, once a week, I swear, I start sobbing because somebody calls me and says, I just sold a piece of property last week and I want to do a 1031. And I have to break the news to them that because we were not in place prior to the closing of the sale, you can no longer do the 1031. So that's probably the number one. The number two example would be, hold on a second, we got a little bit of, here we are. The number two example would be the tightness of those 45 days. So people that don't take it seriously, don't prepare ahead of time. Even if you're not going to contract before you close your sale, every bit of research and due diligence that you can do prior to the sale just speeds up what you've got to do after. Mm-hmm. You'll know if you have spent 2 months looking at a market, you're going to know a good deal the instant you see it, and you're going to be able to jump on it. So that's probably, and then probably I would say the third thing is that people will panic and they'll do one of two things. They will either not do a 1031 because they're scared they won't find a property, or they'll do a 1031 and then they'll buy a property because they think they have to. Mm-hmm. And in fact, a 1031 exchange is not a very expensive proposition. Nationwide, if it's a garden variety property, you're going to pay $750. So to spend $750 to kick the can down the road 45 days to try and find a property that you're going to save $25,000 on, That seems to make a bit of sense, especially when that 750 is going to be tax deductible as well. So it's really going to be like spending 400,000 or 500,000. So that part makes sense. Now, the other half of that, though, is if you can't find the property, don't finish the 1031. There's no penalty for starting and not completing a 1031 exchange. As a matter of fact, the very way that the IRS structures this is that your exchange will always be complete before you have to file your next tax return. So if you can't find a property, let it die. And when you pay your tax, when you file your next return, you pay the taxes. What did you lose at the end of the day? Not much. For trying.
Yeah, just a little pride. Now, somebody asked, how does seller financing affect the 1031 exchange?
Ooh, that could be kind of fun. So seller financing, let's go back to the reinvestment requirements. Buy as much as you sell and use all of the proceeds of the sale. So in an owner carry, one of the things you have to realize is that that note is a proceed. So the note is going to go into your exchange account along with the cash. So let's say that you sold a piece of property for $100,000. They gave you $50,000 down and a note for $50,000. You start a 1031 exchange. In your exchange account, you have a $50,000 cash and a $50,000 note. You have to use those things to purchase your new property. Can you do that? Well, you could go to the seller of the new property and tell them, I've got cash and I've got this note. Will you accept it? They're probably going to say no, because it's a note that they don't have a clue about. Right. It's unseasoned, et cetera, et cetera. But I know a guy named Scott that deals with notes all the time. So what if I were to take that note and offer it to Scott to purchase? Is there anybody you know, Scott, that buys notes?
Just a few people. Just a few people.
Right. So let's assume for a second that you're in a generous mood and you buy that note for $50,000. Well, now in my exchange account, I have $50,000 in cash and I have $50,000 in cash from the sale of the note. Now, can I go and finish my 1031? Absolutely. No problems at all. But it can get even better for someone if they don't want to sell the note on the open market, but they have cash themselves. They can also swap out $50,000 in their own cash for the $50,000 note. So again, inside their 1031, they've got $100,000 in cash. They can go buy a new piece of property, finish the 1031. But meanwhile, outside the 1031 exchange, they own a note for $50,000. And what did they pay for it? $50,000. So how much of that note is taxable? Zero. So the only thing they will pay tax on for the remainder of that note is going to be the interest that comes in every month.
Mm-hmm.
So they just did a 1031 exchange, completely deferred all tax. They bought themselves tax-free income. They made the deal happen, and all they're going to pay is a little bit of interest coming in every month. Okay.
That's not a bad day at the bank. Now, is there any difference in if somebody's using like a charitable trust or anything like that as an alternative for things? Or somebody asked a question here. How can a charitable remainder trust be used as an alternative?
Well, the charitable remainder trusts are a peculiar animal that is going to basically take the tax and give it to the charity of your choice.
Okay.
That's really kind of the net impact of the entire thing. You're going to donate the asset at a certain value. You're going to receive payments. And at the end of the time, the remainder of whatever is left goes to the charitable entity of your choice. So if you're charitably minded, it's a nice alternative to a 1031 exchange. The only beef I have with charitable remainder trusts is that they really don't save you any more money. It's just that that money goes to a charity you like. So it's not as good as giving the money to yourself, but at least you're giving it to friends.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense there. Now, question for you. If somebody's selling off a house, selling off a piece of property, duplex, triplex, whatever, apartment complex, does it have the money have to go into a already built property, or if they're can they buy the land in a project that's being built or anything like that?
Oh, we can do some really fun things with that. So remember, you're taking title to an amount of real estate. So let's say that you were selling a property for $100,000 and you wanted to buy a lot for $100,000 that you were going to build a quad on. Well, simply selling the house and buying the lot covers your 1031 exchange. But let's say that the lot was only $50,000. Now you're going to have a problem because you're buying less than what you sold. So you can either pay tax on the difference, or you could wait to take title to the lot, but have a builder who owns the lot start construction. And whenever that lot is worth at least as much as you sold, then you can execute the purchase of it because you're taking title to at least as much as you sell. So we will see that a lot of times in certain markets. I used to do a ton down in Fort Myers, Florida, where we had some builders that got it.
Yeah.
And the builders would say, you tell me what lot you want. I'll buy it, I'll take title to it, and I'll build it, taking periodic draws from you. So our client did not own the lot. They did not own the house, but they were using draws as earnest money deposits. So that at the end of the time when that house was complete, then we'd have a closing and they would take title to the house. So that's a very elegant solution to it. There is also those squat, and this is kind of on the deep end of things, so get ready to dive.
Okay.
The 1031 exchange requires that you not take title to your new property until your old property closes.
Mm-hmm.
But we can make it look like the opposite by doing what is called a reverse exchange,
Okay.
or a construction exchange, or an improvement exchange. They're all variations on the same theme. And the theme is an IRS approved process where your QI takes title to the lot. Now, you have absolute control over that lot. You have the use of it, the ability to develop it. You carry the insurance, pay the maintenance and the taxes. You get the income off of it. But you don't own it. Nothing more different than a Walgreens that has a land lease for their building. So the QI owns the lot, but you decide you're going to build a property on it, a house on it. So you set about building that house on it. Or it's a small apartment building that needs a lot of value add. And you sold an asset for $500,000, and this small apartment building you could buy for $300,000, but it needs $200,000 more of fix up. So the QI takes title to it, and we hold it while you put $200,000 into it. Now, once you have put $200,000 in it, what's it worth? The price of acquisition, $300,000, plus the improvements you put into it, $200,000. So can you take your $500,000 sale and go buy that property from the QI? Absolutely.
So you would hold in that situation 300 to purchase the new one, and then 200,000 would just be held back and getting the improvements done over the next 180 days before the title changes?
That's exactly correct. Now, it could all come from your exchange account if you've got the money in there. That's obviously the cheapest, and that works slicker than all get out. But you can also borrow the money, or if you've got the cash proceeds, you could use your own money. And then when we complete that 1031, it's as if you were a lender to the QI. So the QI pays you back the 200 and only the 500 from the 1031 goes into that. Reverse exchanges can be awesome for value add properties.
Wow. That's something I never heard of till now. That's phenomenal, Dave. Now, question for you on that. Oh my gosh, it's going to come back to me because it was right there. And then you said that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I had to pay attention there versus thinking what my question was out there. Oh my gosh, it was such a great question too. Okay, we'll come back to that there for you. The what's some of the when people are structuring this up? I always like my buddy Aaron Young from Laughlin. So I said talks about prepare with the end in mind, right? And so
Yes.
it's not difficult to pick up the phone, give you a phone call, kind of walk through kind of what they're trying to do to get a better picture of if they're looking at selling a property 6 months or 3 months or a year from now, right?
Yeah, well, obviously preparation is key. So you're never going to most QIs, you're never going to cause them angst by answering questions because knowledge is really important.
Yeah.
And you may have to bring a realtor up to speed. Sad to say, you may have to bring your accountant up to speed. You may have to negotiate with an ignorant seller or buyer because I get scenarios all the time where someone will say, I'm negotiating with this old guy. That's the keywords, baby. We all want old guys near us when it's time to buy. He's owned the property for 30 years. He won't sell to me because he's going to pay a ton of taxes. Mm-hmm. But he wants to start to become more passive. Well, if they've got enough runway, we can start to educate them on the 1031 process. We can start to educate the old guy on his options so that he all of a sudden realizes that he can get out of this building and not have to pay tax and take his money and put it into something that's going to be a more appropriate retirement type vehicle. So definitely more rather than at the last minute. Now, here's the other extreme to that. I'm not even sure I should share this in open network. The only requirement is that the QI must be in place at or prior to the close. Okay. My record, and if any one of your listeners ever does this to me, I'm coming to find you, Scott.
That's fine.
My record is 20 minutes. We were at a closing, and we had the buyer's side. So they were finishing up a 1031. And I actually went to it just for fun. And of course, you can imagine, I walk into the room, they think it's an enforcer, right? What's Guido doing here? And so the sellers are going, well, who are you? I'm a QI. We're doing a 1031 exchange. These people aren't having to pay any tax. They looked at their realtor and said, you can do that? The realtor kind of shrugged his shoulders. Yeah. They said, you're fired. Now, they were joking. But we took a coffee break. 20 minutes later, the sellers were doing a 1031. So the idea is plan as far ahead as you can. But even if it's the last minute you woke up on Monday and said, oh, crap, I've got a closing on Tuesday. I need a 1031. It can be done.
That's good. That was the answer to the question I was thinking of a minute ago. Exactly.
Oh, okay. Now, speaking of great questions, though, there's a whole other element to this planning with the end in mind thing. And it's for some strange reason, there's a quote of mine that's making the rounds that I'll take it as a backhanded compliment. But my quote was, because of where I live in 1031, you can live tax deferred your entire life, which means as long as you own that replacement property, you're never going to pay the tax. As long as anytime you sell that property, you're never going to pay the tax. You can live your life tax deferred. And you can die and you'll be tax free. But the only problem is you have to die to get it. Which I don't recommend, but still, as an end game, there's some benefits to you. First of all, because as long as you live, you get the use of that tax. So that's just compound interest, baby. That's ticking the clock on income for you as long as you live. But here's the kicker. When you die, your heirs get your assets is what is called a step up in basis, which means they get your property as if they paid market value for it on the day you die. So, in other words, the tax disappears for your heirs. So, okay, you got to die. You don't directly benefit, but you've got some happy kids. And that's actually kind of a neat legacy to leave. I have one set of clients from the Northeast that are on their third generation of doing this. Grandfather left who did 1031s with us, left a substantial portfolio to his children. And his children started at zero tax and continued their own investing. And now one of the parents died, and his children are now taking his portion, and it's tax-free, and they're starting to build their own. And the zeros behind this number are pretty astounding.
Wow. That's pretty interesting to think about it. Somebody take if they own a $400,000 property, they 1030 exchange that into eight $50,000 properties for eight of their kids. The kids can start off doing that aspect as well, is what you're saying, right?
That's exactly right.
Wow.
So the idea of the 1031, the ebb and flow, right? You diversify and increase your holdings. Then towards the end of your career, you start to consolidate into fewer properties, less management, more cash, so you can do things like invest in other classes like notes, right? And then finally at the end, you go into things that are totally passive. Triple net properties, tenants in common properties, Delaware statutory trusts, oil leases, because those all require no effort. You get to take your Alaskan cruise and enjoy the retirement home. Your money is safe. And then finally, when you pass away, those properties go to your heirs and the tax disappears. And that right there in about 30 seconds is a lifetime of a 1031 investor.
That's great. Great stuff. Now, a question for you. One of the things, you ever see people putting options on a lot of properties prior to them closing on their properties as a way to kind of start that ball rolling, or at least getting a price negotiated on the front end before they sell their existing property? You ever see that happening, Dave?
Absolutely. And that's a great way to do it, because a seller obviously is always going to be concerned. Will this person follow through?
Yeah.
They've got to sell another property. Will they really do it? Will it really come through? Well, an option to purchase where you've put some consideration in the game is a great way to convince that seller that you mean business. Another way to do it is a contract that may have an extended or floating closing date,
right,
that has releasable earnest money. All those kinds of things can be used.
That's awesome. Where do you see the mass majority of the properties these days that you're working on? Is it geographically centric, or is it asset class centric that you see a lot of, Dave? I mean, sure, it's probably all across the board, but if you could.
Yeah, it's kind of both. Of course, some of my friends in the multifamily business will shoot me now, but multifamily is kind of what everybody's talking about, but it's kind of like reaching pretty frothy peaks.
Yeah.
So turnkey properties, same sort of thing. I wouldn't say that it's so much asset class centric. It's really where the deals are from. But there is definitely a demographic component to this, in that our friends on the West Coast are really struggling to make cash flow. So it's more of a shift of priority that I'm seeing from properties that you hold because of the appreciation potential, and folks moving those into places where they can get a better return. I'm seeing my California, New York friends selling properties that they're making net operating income and NOI that represents about a 2% cap rate.
Yeah.
Well, that's just not sustainable. But guess what? If that $500,000 property is appreciated at 10% a year, it's worth holding on to. But they're starting to feel like that may have peaked. So now they're looking to other areas in what we call the flyover states.
Yeah.
Right? There's also a really strong move into the Sunbelt states. because people love to position their assets where they want to retire.
Mm-hmm.
So you're seeing that. We're seeing that in Florida. That's a big one as well. And position it because of tax-free status.
Yeah.
So remember, you're going to defer, except in Pennsylvania right now, which does not recognize 1031 on the state level. You're going to, well, and California, which besides being the second highest taxed entity in the world, also has what they call clawback, where no matter where you send your 1031, if you ever sell that, you're going to have to pay California back the tax. No place else has that yet, but it's coming. But if you sell a property in Colorado where there is a state tax, purchase something in Texas where there is not, then when you sell that ultimately, even if you don't do a 1031, you're still going to pay the Fed tax maybe, but you've eliminated the state tax. So places like Nevada, Tennessee, Texas, Wyoming, Florida, Washington, all those places without state income taxes, people are starting to see the dollar figures.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of California people moving here. As we joke around, California with all the droughts and the fires, it's there's no more fruits. It's just full of dried nuts.
Okay, well, you could say that, and then I'll take their side on things because I was in Denver for 20 years, and anybody coming down the ski slopes in a cowboy hat, we just tripped with our ski boots.
Well, real cowboys don't wear cowboy hats on their ski. It's funny. We went to a restaurant the other night, Eddie V's, really nice restaurant here with some friends, and there's a group of guys wearing their hats, their cowboy hats inside. And then we had the same waitress, and I'm like, those guys aren't real cowboys. She's like, what do you mean? I was like, a real cowboy's gonna take his hat off when he enters the building.
There's an old saying for that it's all hat,
no cattle. Yeah, we've seen our plenty of aspect of that there for you. Now, are you seeing a lot of this take place down in, as I'd like to make the joke, God's waiting room there in Florida as well? Obviously.
You laugh, but that's exactly what they used to call St. Petersburg, God's waiting room. Of course, it is quite a lot younger, but yeah, the demographic still is. And as a matter of fact, I read an article, maybe in Forbes, can't remember for sure, but was talking about migration patterns. Florida, and in particular, the northern and inland portions, like from the middle north, are really seeing incredible growth. So the places in between Orlando and the Gulf Coast, Orlando and St. Augustine, and then north up towards Jacksonville, huge growth. And it's for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're still a little bit behind the curve, appreciation-wise, because we got hammered so bad in 2008. We were kind of ground zero. So the other thing is people love to position their assets where they live. And here's another tip and trick to 1031 that they're taking advantage of. Remember that 1031 is a sale of investment real estate followed by a purchase of investment real estate. And what that means is real estate that you intend to hold for productive use in business, trade, or for investment. Now, the key phrase being that you intend to hold. There is no statutory requirement that it must remain your holding as investment real estate. And as a matter of fact, there is a safe harbor that the IRS has given us for this. And the process is this. You live in Brooklyn, New York. You sell a rental property that you have there a couple years ahead of retirement. Use the proceeds to purchase a dope kick-in waterfront short-term vacation rental in St. Petersburg. Use that for investment purposes for a couple years. First of all, you're going to generate some revenue. Secondly, you absolutely can use that some for yourself for personal use. So at least until you get down here, you've got a place to vacation. You've got income coming in. You deferred all your tax. When you're ready to retire, two things happen. First, you sell the property you've lived in. And Scott, I don't know, it's kind of surprising to me, but there are still a lot of people that don't know this portion of the code. When you sell a property that you own and live in, and you've lived in it for 2 out of the 5 years prior to sale, as a married couple, you can take the first $500,000 in profit tax free. And you can do that once every 2 years. So you're going to sell your property up north and you're going to take that money tax free. Where are you going to move?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to change the use of your vacation rental down here in St. Pete. And you're going to do that by simply moving into it. By moving into it, you're changing the use. You do not create a taxable event. So as long as you continue to own that and live in it, you pay no tax on it.
Hang on. That's worth another dollar bill there. Because it's a different thing. That's one big thing about using your self-directed IRA. You can't be living it. Can't take personal use of.
That's a huge difference. That's easy. You can have no personal use of it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool. Now, Dave, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? Or the best way to reach out to you in case they've got questions or want to use you as a QI?
Yeah, best way to catch me is at our education website, which is the 1031investor.com. Dave at the 1031investor.com. We've got a whole series of training videos, calculators, all sorts of things like we talked about today that can also hopefully be a benefit to you and your listeners.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we are honored to have you on there. I know I learned a lot of stuff, so I know Note Nation definitely learned some of the great keys to being able to use 1031s to help you go out and identify some notes that you can invest with by structuring the deal properly, like we talked about on the front end there. But once again, Dave, thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you on Note Camp commercial later on in July. We're talking about as well too, so we're really looking forward to that. But like I said, everybody,
Note Nation as well as a part of Gator Nation, who's going to take care of your Longhorns next year.
There we go. Love it, brother. Well, hey man, thanks so much. You guys enjoy the weather down there. Enjoy your rest of your. Well, it's May's here, and then you're going to be in Colorado in July. You said, which is awesome. Enjoying the summers up there, huh?
But Scott, it's always 5 o'clock somewhere.
Amen to that. Let's pop a top together some point. All righty. Great stuff. All right, guys, you heard him. Check out the 1031investor.com or Dave at the 1031investor.com as well to reach out to him for any questions you might have or to help you start planning with the end in mind in case you're looking to sell some of your real estate off and want to avoid on the taxes and use a 1031 exchange. So once again, everybody, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sharing. If you really, really enjoy this, make sure you go on to YouTube, Vimeo, leave the comments there. Make sure you go on to iTunes as well and leave us a review and a 5-star. We'd appreciate it. But otherwise, go out, make something happen, everybody, and we'll see you all at the top.